Just a quick heads up before we start. On Sandwiched, we talk honestly about life, loss, and caregiving. That means conversations may touch on topics such as death and grief. We invite you to listen with care, and please do step away if you need to. Welcome to another episode of Sandwiched. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome Biagio Arobba as our guest today. Biagio, in his day life, is a software developer. He's a twin. He's the youngest of four. He's got a family. He is also a user of the Tumbleweed platform, and he's living the sandwich life. Biagio, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you here, and excited to learn more about your story and what the sandwich life means to you. So as we're getting started, why don't you go ahead and let us know, how are things going? How's your morning? And how are you juggling life right now?
Oh yeah. It's kind of interesting because I had never really heard the sandwich thing until you started talking about it, and then I kept getting these thoughts of like, yeah, like wait a minute, yeah, like as you're talking about it, I'm relating and like noticing all these things. I'm like, okay, I see, because like I'm dealing with kids. School just started, getting the kids to school. I have some of my own work I've got to do, and then also just making sure that the parents are taken care of. I guess I'm kind of lucky because we have different brothers and sisters and nieces that can kind of help out, nieces and nephews. Some of my family members are nurses too, and so
Oh,
they
okay.
can kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, that's like a big extra help.
Yeah.
So like whenever my mom's in a doctor's visit, she can get her phone out and have my sister right there, conversing at the same time, and they can always ask for copies of their labs and stuff like that, so they can have a second pair of eyes on it. So she has an extra advocate in some of these meetings, so that's helpful. And then they're actually visiting this week, so my mom has a doctor's appointment to do a checkup. She had a little minor early detected cancer, but they did um, they got it taken care of, and this is her, I want to say, 2 year visit. So every 6 months she's been coming out here. We're from South Dakota, which is a smaller state, and I'm sure they have some really nice hospitals and stuff. But there's a really good program for cancer care in Omaha, and so we get, they were like, gave her some options, just like, oh, my son's out in Omaha, so I'm gonna go there. So, she comes out every 6 months. Um, so next time it's going to be in January, I believe February. And so they're out here. She's in a what do you call it, like a walker. She kind of has a walker to help because she has some osteoporosis. Yeah, it's always interesting. They're going to be okay. My dad kind of helps walk around and get her stroller, move places, and all that. So they just kind of do their own thing right now. I don't know. That's me. Is that
Yeah.
I could go on
That's
and on.
great. Yeah, no. It's good. We want people to have a little bit of, learning more about you as a guest, right? And so it sounds like you've got a lot happening, and I'm so appreciative that you're willing to carve out part of your day to sit down and chat with us. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.
As we're getting started, I loved how you mentioned that you and I met when I was an accelerator program in Nebraska. And so Tumbleweed, we had gone through an accelerator program last year, and that's where you and I were first introduced. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But where I first wanted to start was, you mentioned that it wasn't until I started talking about the sandwich generation that that's where you really started to hear about it. So now that you've heard through my lens, I would love to hear, how do you define sandwiched? What does that mean to you?
I mean, I think it's one of those things where if an issue comes up, you just take care of it. And then before you know it, you look around and you're like, oh, yeah. So I don't know if like being in that position is something that I like notice, but
Mm.
when you call it out, it's obvious.
Yeah.
But, being in the middle of it, I'm just like helping take care of things. But when I look at it, yeah, like 10 years ago, I wasn't having to take care of my parents,
Yep.
and you give me another like 6 or 7 years, and I won't be taking care of kids either. And so I could be either in one side of the bread, I could be on the one side of the bread or the
Yeah.
other side of the bread, right?
Yep.
And but it just happens that right now it's just, I'm in that spot. And I think the only reason why I probably feel a little bit better is I'm not like an only child. I don't have,
Yeah.
to worry about that. So I do have help, so it doesn't feel as worrisome. Um, but yeah, but like I'm just in that stage where things seem to be really busy, and it's because I guess I am helping a lot more. But also, it feels like kind of good. I think that's one of those things where you feel like you're at a spot in life where you have some sort of like help to offer,
Yeah.
and so it's not as bad. I think if I was in my 20s and my parents are going through something where they needed help, I might be like, oh, but I also have other stuff in my life I want to do, you know. But I'm at that spot where I feel like I can help, so that's also nice too.
Good. Yeah, and I think that's actually a great place for us to kind of start to dig into you and your family's journey navigating your parents' aging, right? One of the things that when you and I first met that you had talked about was your Excel sheet. And I'd love for you just to give our listeners kind of a what is it and how did it come about? Like what made you and your family start to go through and put together this Excel sheet for your parents?
Right. So probably the story is that because I'm a software developer and I've done project management before, you know, in my mind, it's like that's kind of how you organize things. But I'm a big believer that if you know what the rules are, then you know how to break them. And so, you know, we don't need a formal project management process, but a good spreadsheet is a good start. And I think the main thing I wanted was that the spreadsheet will have a column for the status, and the status is to do, doing, or done. You know, and I knew that's all we really need to have. We added a few things that we may or may not use, like a date column. We don't actually use that as much, but I have a notes column on the right that we use that pretty well. And then just making sure we review the spreadsheet whenever we meet. And so that as a habit was something I knew would help with project management sort of thing. Now, in terms of actually doing the thing, I think what happened is I happen to be the one in the family that sort of like sees things in advance and then tries to be a little more proactive about it. I know I did that during the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, I was like prepared before everybody else was
Wow.
running to the shelves to get toilet paper. You know, I was
Yes.
like, we were all taken care of already. We were all okay. So I've kind of like have always been the one to sort of read the tea leaves and then like say, hey, we should be doing this. And I think what happened is, you know, my parents were getting to a spot where it was just like questionable about how well they're going to be living on their own.
Yeah.
And so I was like, we need to start talking about this. But if we're going to talk about it, there's all these unknowns going on. What are we going to do about this? We're going to do about that. So I was like, you know what? Let's get on a Zoom and we're probably going to need a spreadsheet just so that we can start listing out what are the stuff we have to do. Um, and as we're talking, I pulled up the spreadsheet and I want to say we have close to 100 items on there.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have about 70 of them. I would say about like 60 of them that are done. And then another 10-ish that are have probably been moved into the we're not going to do that later, or it's kind of deferred. And then all of the most pressing issues have been already taken care of. So now it's stuff that's like doesn't seem as pressing, but there's still things to take care of. Um, so yeah, that's I guess that's how it got started, I suppose.
That's awesome. And I mean, so about 60, it sounds like, of 100, so about 60% completion, right? And one of the things that I really try and share with folks is when we're thinking about end of life planning, whether it's for ourselves or someone in our circle, parent, grandparent, friend, maybe even a neighbor, right? You know,
Yeah.
this is not a one and done. It may feel like it, right? And there might be prioritization needed, right? Like based on a
Right.
health situation, maybe even a memory issue, we might need to prioritize certain aspects of the to do list. But I
Yeah.
love that this is something that you and your family, it lives on. You meet, if memory serves, you guys meet relatively consistently to kind of go through and to work on new elements, add elements, make updates. Talk through that a little
Yeah.
bit more.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought some of this up. So the list, technically, from a project management perspective, is called the backlog. And the thing about the backlog is it's always growing. There's always going to be stuff in there. But the key is you look at it and you decide which ones are the one you want to tackle right away. So the most important stuff ends up percolating to the top, and the things that aren't as important end up getting done later, put in the later stage. So you'll always have a list. It's not like you actually complete the list, So I would say even like a percentage done is sort of a misnomer
Yeah.
because, how do you really decide what done is? So I think it's a net win because we've gotten taking to take care of all the stuff that we felt like was the most pressing. And so we got to a point where the meeting started feeling like we weren't as like engaged in the list, and I think that was a success. And so I said, you know what? Because we got all this stuff done, let our next thing should be organizing a get together. Like,
Yes.
let's have a party and celebrate it. So I created another tab called Partay, Partay, and we started I opened was it Ally Bank high, what do they call it, high yield account, or
Yep.
you get like 4% on it or something like that. And so we all started just chipping in to that. And then the next year, we all went out to visit my niece in Sacramento and had just kind of like a family get together to celebrate having, to say, look, we actually accomplished something. The list doesn't have to be done,
Yeah.
but we feel like we're in a better spot, and let's kind of celebrate that a little bit.
That's
So
awesome.
we did that, and then the other interesting thing is, I think this is a telltale sign that we're kind of like through the most important things, is we stopped kind of wanting to really spend time on the list, and now we just get on so my mom can have time to talk and
Yeah.
catch us up to date on what she's been going on through the week, or like she'll tell me a couple weeks in advance, oh, I'm going out to see Biagio and to see Reddy, and we yada yada, and I got to do this and that, and so it kind of gives her a chance to like be connected to all of us, and we all just kind of make it a habit now just to hop on and see everybody over Zoom.
I love that. And I'm so glad you shared the partay aspect. I think, from my own experience and people that I've spoken with, it can be very tiring. Often, folks in the caregiver space who are navigating this, there's some burnout. And I think we
Yeah,
sometimes do forget to celebrate, right? And I love
yeah,
that your family did that for so many reasons. One is to celebrate all the accomplishments, and two, right, to enjoy time with them while they're able to, right? It really serves many purposes. So that's so beautiful.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I've had relatives who passed away kind of suddenly, and then you're just like, wow, what if we could have spent a little more time together?
Yeah.
I will say that I actually can trace I can trace like where I got a lot of these ideas from.
Yeah.
This particular one was from Tim Ferriss in the 5 Hour Work Week,
Yep.
where he talks about if you organize stuff well enough, you should also enjoy the fruits of it too, because that's why you're being organized, is so you can enjoy it. So if you spend time having a clean space organized, you should go spend time in that space, so you can feel like that's why you have that space organized. Same thing, you get a list and you work on it. You should enjoy the fruits of that some. So you have to do some kind of celebration. Otherwise, you're missing out on the whole point of doing some of that stuff. So
Absolutely.
that's yeah. So I guess we can credit Tim Ferriss on that particular piece.
Well, credit Tim Ferriss as the ideator, and I think honestly for you for making it happen, right? Because I think we hear lots
Yeah,
of fantastic ideas. It's then how do we take the idea into action? So he may have had the idea, but you made it happen. So that's awesome. Y'all got to
yeah,
spend time in Sacramento.
yeah,
I'm curious, as your family has been coordinating, I want to make sure I get this right. So I know you have a twin, and you, I believe, have two other older siblings, correct?
yep,
So there's four of you total,
yep.
and you're all in different parts of the world, I believe. So you're not all in the same location. So I'm thinking logistically, how did you coordinate, kind of virtual sessions to meet with your parents and to work on this planning?
Getting on Zoom wasn't too bad. I think a problem we've dealt with pretty consistently is if it seems like people aren't able to get onto the Zoom,
Mm.
we'll be like, hey, is this time not working for everybody? And so we've had it on Friday at noon. We've shifted to Friday afternoon. We've moved it to Wednesday. So we're always kind of keeping an eye on like shifting it around a bit, just because the seasons, like summer's there, then school starts, and then it's
Yeah.
winter, and so just kind of keeping an eye on being able to adjust for that time zones, just making sure that it works with everybody's time zone. I think once we did one of those it's online. I don't remember what it's called, but you sort of like have everybody list out their schedule, and it sort of gives you a weekly list with like a dark spot in terms of how many people can
Yeah.
meet.
Yep.
It's one of those like it's not open source, but it's like these free websites that
Yep.
you can get everybody coordinated on a time. So we use that before to kind of figure out like what times work well for people. And sometimes a person will put that on there and they're not really thinking that it could be some interruptions. And then we actually do that. And then it like, seems like for a few weeks, it's just not working. So then we'll go back and say, okay, when does really work? So I think if anything, like that's been the biggest thing to make sure that we still stay consistent.
Yeah, that makes sense. One thing that I wanted to really, talk about is in some of our earlier conversations, you're a part of the Rosebud Sioux tribe in South Dakota.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I really loved the way that you had spoken about this before, and I really want to spend some time digging into with our listeners, is how your culture and how your tribe views end of life and death. Because I think it might be different for some folks in different cultures, traditions, parts of the world. So I'd love for you to share more about how you and your family and your culture view this journey.
Yeah. I mean, there's some wording we've kind of had to tiptoe around. We're not really supposed to talk about, death and, those kinds of things, especially around our parents and or other relatives. So like we call it helping mom and dad with aging and then also helping them with their journey. And
Journey.
the journey is the word we use for when you pass away, you actually move into another stage in life, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you're journeying back to go see your ancestors. And I guess we're the star people, because like up in the constellations is where our relatives are. There's that Milky Way, and there's a part of it that forms a road, and you just mentally that's the place you have to go because that'll take you to where your relatives are. We have like star quilts that kind of are they're not really a religious thing, but they're just kind of like symbolic
Mm.
thing that kind of reminds you that the stars are where your ancestors are. And so we talk about the journey, and we talk about helping them with aging, but like uh, you know try to be just a little bit delicate with kind of how we explain things, because like my parents know they're falling apart, they're getting older, and we've had to talk about, do they want to be cremated, not cremated. My mom went to boarding school, so there's a question around whether it's okay, and apparently now it's okay to do. You can be cremated, and then like where their plots are going to be, and also there happens to be some bit of tribal burial assistance,
Okay.
and so just making sure we knew what program that was and what forms we have to fill out for that. Um, so yeah, just getting some of that stuff figured out. Also, if they're going to have a wake, like where the wake could be at. So there's the bigger town of Mission where there's a community center that a lot of people have wakes from, but my mom's from St. Francis. And so there's a smaller center there and she wants the wake over there. So
Okay.
kind of just figuring that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it really ties into a lot of the end of life and legacy components, right? That we're thinking about and that can be uncomfortable. And, as someone who works in technology supporting folks with aging, caregiving, and end of life plans, right? I try to be super mindful of, to your point, death for a lot of folks is very uncomfortable. It taps into mortality, sometimes fear for folks. And so I'm always looking at ways to speak about it, but in a softer way. And so it sounds like really just focusing on the journey aspect could, for some, be a little bit more comfortable, but still kind of, it's really about the same thing. It is a part of the journey. This episode of Sandwiched is brought to you by Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is a purpose-driven platform helping families navigate aging, caregiving, and legacy planning with ease and compassion. Right now, the first 100 listeners to sign up will receive a free Tumbleweed membership for 1 full year. That's a value of over $100. But once those 100 spots are gone, they're gone. So don't delay. Go to tumbleweedplan.com. That's Tumbleweed Plan, PLAN.com. Click Get Started, fill in your account details, and enter the promo code SANDWICHED, SANDWICHED. Thanks for listening. Now back to today's episode. I always tell people, in my perspective, I spent a lot of years in healthcare. For me, death and dying is really an extension of living. It's just really those next stages. It's a part of, to your point, the journey. And so thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it because it is difficult.
There's one more thing too. I read the book Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell, and it talks about how, really good stories like have something to offer people at any stage in life. And it also just talks about like the stages of life that people go through. And I think one of the things that happens is, what happens when the hero is no longer the hero? Like you remember in was it the Lord of the Rings, like with Bilbo Baggins? So he had his journey, but then later, when they had to have that council and whatnot, he's no longer the hero anymore. So he's having to give that up, sort of thing. Now you juxtapose that with this idea that in Lakota, everybody has value. Everybody has something to offer. When we have people that deal with different kinds of disabilities, we put in the effort to take care of them, but we also talk about them like they're teachers and, guides and people that will help us learn about life. And, if you're going through something, that's not a reason to shy away, but it's a reason to, you know, uh, grow, have, some sort of growth in your life. Um, the other thing too is that in our culture, we have like the good, good things and bad things, right? Like in the Western side, they always want to look at everything as being good. Like for instance, our word for praying is like the same word for crying. So
Oh,
cheye is to cry, and wachekia is like the crying of something.
mm.
And so crying, also like when you care about something, it's also the same word as like suffering, difficulty, you know? And it's sort of
Yeah.
like two ends of the coin, you don't care about something unless you actually have to go through something, you
Yeah,
know?
that's true. Yeah.
And so in the Western world, everything has to be nice and peachy and, let's look at the bright side. But I always look at it as like reading a book with only half the letters of the alphabet. It's like really hard to understand what you're reading. And I think people have a lot of stress and confusion and stuff because they're wanting to see the bright side of everything. And that's fine, but you're missing the life. You're missing the real picture. Now, I guess why am I bringing all this up? Because I'm noticing this this thing where my parents are still important and valuable, and we pay attention to them. We talk to them, even if they're having memory issues or whatnot. We're not discarding that or discounting it and stuff. But at the same time, they're also like they want to be in there and like doing stuff and participating and all that. And sometimes they just can't. Can't as much. Now we'll make accommodations. It's not that we don't accommodate. Like if we're good. My mom has a walker, but it's the type of walker you can sit in. So making sure there's place for her to sit down and all that. But it's not the same as when we were all, younger and
Yeah.
able to get around and do things more. So I think like, for instance, my mom will plan like 5 things she's going to do for the day. And we're
Yep.
like
Yep.
thinking, well, realistically, she's going to get like one of those done,
Yep.
And so it's kind of interesting just seeing also this like, um, we have to value and cherish, and we have to pay attention to the struggle. And it becomes more and more struggle because they're also dealing with a different stage in their life. And so just navigating all that, I think has been interesting.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that really resonated with me. One is that I had very young parents, right? And that can be great and that can be challenging, like anything, right? And so one of the benefits of having such young parents, they were 17 when I was born, is I got to know my great grandparents on both sides. Not for very long. I mean, I was a teenager when my last great grandparent passed away, but I knew her really well. I got to spend time with her,
Wow.
right, when she was in her 70s and late 70s, which was fantastic. Not a lot of people have ever met their great grandparents. And then obviously with young parents who were still trying to be teenagers and young adults at the same time as having kids, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents on both sides. And so they became like secondary parents in some situations, but I also got a lot of time with them. I got to know them, right? I got to live through their experiences and hear their stories. And as you were sharing, I do wonder sometimes if that's even influenced having worked in healthcare, but also to kind of this mission to shed a light on our aging population, right? Because yes, they're a little slower often, but they have so much wisdom. They have so much that they can share back with us. And even when we don't want to maybe hear their lessons that they're trying to share because we're going through a similar situation, it's like, no, like you don't understand, it's so different. And then you actually dig into it, it's like, oh, okay, it's not different. Yeah, maybe now I'm dealing with it because it's on social media versus at, at a workplace or whatever, but it's really not that different. Their story is quite relevant in the journey. But that really stood out to me. The other thing that you shared that also was something that I kind of wanted to circle back on was there's a little bit of what you shared in the undertone was aging population has a lot to give, but also kind of my interpretation is, and in conversation I've heard this, they can feel very invisible, right? And I think about a lot of conversations with my grandmother, and she talks about probably when she was starting to get into, I believe, her late 60s and early 70s. And they see some gray and they see someone who's a little bit older, right? And she's like, I feel invisible. Like nobody sees me. I'm just in everybody's way, right? And it's very, very painful. And that's probably, from what she shared with me, been the hardest part of the aging journey. She's like, my brain, I feel like I'm 40. She's like, inside, I feel like I'm 40. Like, but I get it on the outside. Like nothing is saying 40 here, but she said that's probably been the most painful part of her aging journey, is just feeling invisible.
Well, so the part of me that's learned to be a little more what is it, like having a little more emotional, the EQ thing, kind of emotional
Emotional
quotient.
intelligence, or yep, of course.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Says that means the person is feeling bad and they need to be heard, and we need to also figure out how to accommodate. Right? We need to understand, like it's not just about being heard, but they're saying there's something they need help with, and I think that's important. At the same time, I mean, it's a thing. Like I have 3 kids, and sometimes I feel sad about like maybe not doing the best with my first as I could. And then also, not only did I not know how to be a parent then, but then all of a sudden now they have to share with this other sibling. But what I've learned, from others like Gabor Mate, is that that's natural.
Yep.
They're going through their role in the world, and every family is different because that first child has their experience as a family, and the second child has a different experience in being with the family. And so it's like for each child, it's a different experience that they're going through. And I think this ties into this idea of suffering is also part of life.
Yeah.
So it I think that we need to listen and understand and accommodate and acknowledge, but also that it's a different part of life, and that it maybe sound kind of weird to say. I don't want to discount it, but to kind of celebrate that, that it's okay to feel bad in certain ways. You know, so you wanna especially if there's some kind of cool thing they want to do, or somehow you can give them a gift of an experience.
Yep.
You don't want to miss out on that opportunity because you just ignored them, right? Because like otherwise, maybe we wouldn't have had a few last hurrahs, and then also like had some insights from that, or had some, like those are important. But you also don't want to take away their opportunity to live in that phase of their life,
Yep.
because that is the thing, you know.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, so I'm the oldest in my family. My family makeup is maybe not so unique anymore, but I've got 5 younger sisters through multiple marriages on both sides, right? So I've got some younger siblings on both sides, and our experiences and journeys have been quite different. And I think to your point, like everyone's childhood and family dynamic looks different because of where they're born, right? Like how they're situated in the world, who they look up to, who's available to them. So, I always try and remind myself, like, okay, are there some things with different situations that I'm like, oh, I'm a little envious of that, or I really wish this was the case. But to your earlier point, the hardest things that I've gone through and the hardest things that I've done, when I reflect back on them, they're the ones that I find the most joy from, right? Because and maybe it's just the getting through something that's so hard, whether it's, building Tumbleweed from a seedling of an idea into a business, or it was grad school where I was like, I'm a I'm a first generation high school graduate, first generation college graduate, first person going to grad school in my entire family, right? And so like it was hard and nobody knew what I was going through or understood. And it's like, no, I can't do those things because I'm working and I'm going to school. Like, no, I don't have time to go see grandpa this week. And I'm sorry, I love you, but I can't. Right. And so but getting through it, right, it really, as I reflected back on all these moments, it was a great reminder of the hard stuff can be worth it, right? And I think that's easier. Like, I know for me, I live in a glass half full life. I know that's not everyone's lived experience, but that's just for me how I navigate the situation. And I'm grateful for that. But it really is like, there's a lot of positivity to come through the hard times. Maybe not in the moment, right? When you're living through it, it's like, oh, I just need this to be over. I can't do this anymore. But then we get to the other side and we can reflect back on it. So I really appreciate you sharing that. That makes a lot of sense to me. So Biagio, tell me more about how your role in software development and working in technology it sounds to me like it's had some influence on your caregiving approach and even how you helped your family get organized around helping support your parents and their aging journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's where like the spreadsheet, um, also figuring out the timing of things to keep, if things start kind of fading in terms of the regular meetings to like make sure we're on top of the best times for everybody to meet. Um, the idea of the spreadsheet, I'm kind of drawing from this idea of a scrum board.
Yeah.
There's a really nice book by Jeff Sutherland called Scrum: The Art of Doing Twice the Work in Half the Time. And what's nice about it is it goes story by story, and it's not a technical book. It just gives you stories and how he came up with these ideas around project management.
Yeah.
And it all kind of makes sense. And that's kind of goes back to like when you know the rules, you know how to break them, kind of thing. And I think he would agree. He's really big on that too, I believe. But it's but you have to know, you have to understand what you're doing, and um, well, I mean, anybody, you can get started with a spreadsheet. You should.
Yeah.
That's fine. You don't have to be an expert to do that. Like, do that. Go out and make it happen. Um, and then I actually, you know what? I'm going to toss in this one thing. It's not just project management because I talked about that a little bit, but it's also about agency.
Mm.
Um, it's also this idea of who is allowed to contribute, and I think that actually also ties back to an indigenous value. We have people of all ages that are allowed to contribute. We don't have the kind of hierarchy that you might see where you have to wait for the person that's the one to do the thing. So anybody can have inspiration and say, hey, what about this? And if it's, seems interesting enough, you get enough people interested in it, or there's a need, and all of a sudden now you're filling that need. You don't have to wait for that. And so I think having some agency to say, I'm going to suggest that we do this, and let's see if everybody really wants to, instead of rather than waiting for somebody or having to say, oh, I have to have somebody else speak up for me or something like that. And I guess in talking about this, we also have to recognize that I'm a guy,
Yep.
and there is a lot more leadership roles that women have in our community. In fact, we used to be matriarchal, and it wasn't until the Westerners came along they practically forced us to be, westernized in things. But we had really strong leaders that were women, negotiators, medicine women, that kind of stuff. But it was the West that kind of forced us to be more patriarchal. But I'm sure it's a different experience. But I will tell you that uh, my sister and niece are nurses, and they're very much, look, I know how to solve some problems here. I mean, I guess we're kind of, benefit in that way, but they can also speak up and will listen. And my sister too, if she has something to say, and my mom, and if one of us start listening, my mom will tell us to listen. She'll say, hey guys, you need to pay attention here because this is important. And so, and she'll speak up for other people. And so, Um, I would say that we don't have any sort of like you got to go through so and so to
Yeah.
sort of be heard
Yeah.
sort of thing. And so I guess I am in a position of privilege there, you know, to some extent, being a guy. But at the same time, I do think that and they're not here to speak for themselves, but I think my sisters would say they feel really strongly that they can speak up and say stuff and they'll be heard too, you
Yeah.
know. But I think agency is a important thing.
It absolutely is. And I think I learned so much from people who are in different journeys than me, people who are much younger than me, right? And I think it's there is no perfect person or way to do something. You don't have to have, done these 7 steps in order to be the person who has value and their thoughts around a situation. And so I really love that you shared that. And I also want to acknowledge gratitude around also, right, as a man walking into a room, I know that that comes with privilege. I know that that comes with power, that comes with, a number of things. And it can be uncomfortable sometimes to think about, right? It doesn't mean that we aren't hyper effective and that we aren't awesome at what we do, right? That's not the case. It's really just there's a perception in a patriarchal society where we do get to walk into a room and then people are known and automatically start to pay attention.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm tall. That seems to help too. I'm 6'1",
Yes, all the
used to be
things,
6'2".
right?
You know what? I will say this though. So since we're talking and it's helping me reflect and all that, um, I so when I was younger, there was stuff I maybe thought I should have said, but I didn't say anything.
Mm.
And I think as time goes on, you kind of get to the point where you're like, well, shoot, I better just make something happen. Um, and I don't have to wait for permission to do that. So I think in addition to being from a place where, you know, all ages and everybody is encouraged or allowed to have some level of agency and leadership roles. I think also when you're like you don't sometimes there's things you wish you would have spoken up. You probably get to a point where like, you know what, I'm just gonna try to take charge a little more often. I'm gonna sort of like jump in there
Yep.
and say something. So like if I was younger, maybe I have more times in my life where I'm like, I'm gonna wait for somebody else.
Mm.
But if I were to have something to say right now to other people, I'd be like, any age or whatever, just get in there and just full, full charge ahead. Show people what you're doing, and if you have the some movement in that direction, people will want to follow along and whatnot. You know, you don't have to wait to share a spreadsheet or to get a meeting set up or to sort of chart the way or explain what should happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, and I think that leads perfectly into what I was going to ask you about. In our early conversations, there were a few phrases that it sounds like you kind of live your life by. And I'm going to adapt one of them just for sensitivity of our listeners. So we'll call it the get stuff done model. Insert bleep in the middle, figure it out, and wake people up. What do those mean to you?
Oh wow, yeah. So I've kind of said some of those things, right?
Yep.
Uh, okay. Um, I think the thing is there's always, I've noticed a lot of information available, but for some reason people are waiting. Um, so like, people are waiting. Like when the pandemic was around, there was news, there was something in a boat, there was like people at a cruise ship. It was like a slow moving thing. And if I pause for a minute, it was like, this is weird. I could say, well, let me think through what could this mean then? And I'm thinking, well, it probably means that there's some kind of disease going around that's going to spread. And then you're just waiting for, like, is there a shoe that's going to drop? And like, if you think that there's a shoe there, why wait for it to drop? You know, just identify it and say, okay, if I were to stock up on food, I probably would feel a little more safer now, you know? And so, like, why wait for the shoe to drop? So I saw it and I was like, there's a shoe that's about to drop. And so it was like a couple weeks before everybody else was freaking out. I don't know what the trigger was, but I was like, hey, let's stock up, right? Um, and so that's just been kind of my way of going about things. You know what? I think there's something, this is going to sound really weird, but I'm always picking up things from random places. I remember listening to the writers of Seinfeld,
Okay.
and the writers of Seinfeld were talking about how, and this was one guy in particular, was talking about how the characters in Seinfeld were terrible people. They just did terrible, like on its value, they were just selfish and doing crazy stuff, but it was all terrible. And so it was fitting that at the end that they all got arrested, right? But I noticed that when we watch TV, we sort of like just accept what's going on and we sort of put ourselves in the shoes, or we kind of have this like loss of reality, and we're not looking at things objectively. I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And so I started looking at TV shows in a different way, and I started looking at them in a way of like, well, what if I'm more objective about this? What's going on here? Are these good people or not? Like Breaking Bad came out and people love
Yeah.
Breaking Bad, but you look at the main character
Yep.
and he just is a fumbling idiot. He's what my dad would call an intellectual moron.
Yep.
He's somebody who knew the science behind making some kind of drug, but he just fumbled and messed things up over and over again. And he said a few cool things for like a second until he got squashed, and then is just going back to this humiliating situation. And there's all these people that just have watched it casually without thinking about it. And they're like, oh, it's so cool. They're all cool. And I'm like, no, they're not. They're bumbling
Yes.
idiots,
Yep.
you know? And so I think that kind of gave me this like pause and like looking at what's going on in life, and like, not looking at it as like a TV show where I'm just like going with the flow, but like being a little more like, okay, well, what is this? What's happening? What do I think about it? Is this good? Is this bad? To be a little more objective. So it's kind of weird. I remember that being kind of a thing for me. And
Yeah.
so now when something like the news is happening about a disease coming out, like, a boat that has like this coronavirus, I'm not looking at it saying, oh, this is a show. I'm looking at it saying, what do I think critically about this? You
Yeah.
know? And so that kind of helped me a little bit to say, critically, this is not looking very good.
Yeah.
And so we were all stocked up. I told my sister a month in advance that, hey, you better talk to mom and dad and get them, get some arrangements made because they may have to be in lockdown. And then I remember telling my mom something, and she really appreciated this. I said, um, every day get up and brush your teeth, dress up, put your shoes on, like make it like it's a day. And I think I learned this from like an interviewing technique where if you're going to be in like a job interview, you should still, even if it's over the phone, you should still wear a suit and tie and still dress up, because you end up feeling professional. You talk professional. It comes across, in your demeanor and conversation. And so I was like telling them, yeah, this pandemic thing, but um, just get up every day, brush your teeth, really, really go through a routine that makes it feel like, you're there and ready for the day. And my mom told me later that was like a huge help for her, because because she has an immune issue, because she had a kidney transplant. So she's on immunosuppressants.
Yeah.
And so they had to be isolated. We had to have people drop off groceries for them, things like that. And so that was a big help. So I don't know. I kind of went through a bunch of things on being
Yeah.
proactive, being critical, but also like not waiting for permission, but then also, so taking some initiative in advance, but based on being critical.
Yeah.
I think, um, yeah,
Yeah.
asking for things too. You'd be surprised. Some people are like, well, I don't know if I'm going to get any movement here if I ask for this or ask for that, but people are so willing to help when you start explaining, especially when you explain what's going on. Don't be afraid of like telling a sob story too, if it kind of helps give a person a little more empathy on what's happening. But at the end of the day, you're getting something taken care of, Oh, we're going through this. This is happening. This is really hard for us. Could you help us with yada yada yada? Oh, great. I'm so thankful. You kind of, it's a mechanism, it's a technique. You don't have to feel, bad about it. But at the end of the day, it's also part of just, and people are willing to help, but it's a part of getting some things taken care of,
Yeah.
and people are willing to help more than you'd realize.
100%. And I think that actually is a great reminder of even how we met, right? We initially met, had a conversation. You were a mentor for N Motion powered by Generator. And then, we ended up having coffee together. You shared your spreadsheet as we were building the product, which was right. But I think some of the things that I've had to learn, especially in the last couple of years, as I reflect on becoming a startup founder, having spent over 20 years mostly in corporate America, one of the things that I learned was I had to learn what I call the art of the ask, right? And to me, it is an art form, right? Because the ask looks different with different people. It looks different in different situations. And for me, it hasn't always been comfortable. And it's not because I'm afraid of people. I mean, I love talking to people. It was really just, do they have time? Are they willing? Right. And then through a lot of leadership development programs, building a startup, I've found that, to your point, people really do just want to give back. And if you say, hey, I'm respectful of your time, like, could you help me with X? Or do you know anything about Y? In general, people want to say yes, right? And so I absolutely ask. And that's very broad, right? If you need help from healthcare, if you need help with aging, ask someone who has been helping as a caregiver for a family member and you don't know where to start. How did they get started, right? So I think there's so many values there.
They're actually, so it's funny because there's a couple of really good nuggets I got from Timothy Ferriss from that 4 Hour Work Week book. And one of them is, if you need to get over the fear of asking, then come up with a line that's something like, I know this is completely odd to ask, or here's a real weird question I got to say. And it helps you and them sort of get prepared for it. And then usually when it's something normal, they're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can help you with that. But it helps me get over the hump as much as I hope it helps the listener when I'm calling somebody and talking to them. I'd be like, hey, yeah, I have this like really odd question I need to ask you, you know? So uh, having a little opening statement like that can kind of help you maybe get over that hump. But once you ask people enough times, you start to realize that, yeah, okay, so they're a lot more willing. But I still use that technique all the time because it just helps me to kind of uh, ask when I need to. Because if you don't, what are you going to do? If
Yeah.
you didn't ask, you're not going to get the help.
People don't know. People don't know what's going on in your head. I mean, what's the risk?
Right.
Really, what's the biggest risk that says no? Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Then no problem. Moving on. Right. I wanted to circle back to something that I think was really important for folks, whether they're aging themselves or helping someone navigate aging, is you talked about the situation with your mom and just the importance of getting up and brushing your teeth, getting dressed in something that makes you feel good, right? It makes you feel pretty. It makes you feel handsome, like whatever the it is. Putting on shoes. Shoes for me is key, especially when I work at home, right? Having shoes on just shifts my perspective in my day. There's a lot of, having worked in healthcare for a lot of years, there's a lot of support around that, right? Whether it's someone who's aging or even just any of us, right? From a mental health perspective. But I really wanted to just kind of circle back and share with folks, like, that is such an important statement, right? And especially when we think about our aging population, when we're looking at, do they need in-home support? Should they be at a nursing facility or an assisted living? They really look at what are called activities of daily living, right? And it's a very basic list, right? And it's like, let's go through the list and see what this person can or can't do. And the ADLs, activities of daily living, really are influenced a lot by just how that individual shows up in their daily life, which is things like, do they brush their teeth? Do they bathe consistently? Do they get dressed, or are they always in pajamas, right? Like, those simple things can really extend our health and even our mental health capacity. So I just wanted to circle back on that because I think what you shared there is so important, and it's tiny, right? It can feel very tiny, but it really truly can have such a profound impact on people's aging.
Well, yeah, okay, so there's something to that. So one, my mom did say that after the pandemic, she continued to do that.
Good.
And she felt like it really was kind of almost like a good tip for her. But I will say that at the same time, we also notice things like, for instance, she was having a hard time lifting her arm up very high, which means it's hard for her to get something out of the shelf, which means it's hard for her to make something for herself, food. So like one thing could be like, okay, making things at the counter level so it's easier for her to get to. But it's also an indicator that, okay, so there's something that's starting to disappear here, which is that ability to make your own stuff. And um, so keeping an eye on that, like keeping an eye, and that's one of the things we do talk about. Like when we heard that she had a hard time reaching for the shelf, that then became not only a conversation, probably actually became more like back conversations. Like, we're listening to that, talking to my mom, asking her about it, but then we're talking amongst ourselves as siblings.
Yep.
Okay, how does this affect things? Are we going to have to start planning now for another stage? That sort of thing. And starting to really communicate with each other and make plans for, okay, well, where is she going to go if she needs that? And,
Yep.
we have talked to her about those facilities where they're more like assisted facilities if she needs to. And, even looking into like planning for those. And, we haven't necessarily taken the step of getting there next, but we were able to start to organize. And so that's the other thing that I think is kind of interesting is probably the list is really important to start with, but I noticed that we've kind of built some skills up that are beyond the list. So, which is our ability to then communicate with each other
Yes.
regularly and start, mulling over what do we do next kind of thing and starting to be there in the moment. Because what you don't want is to not communicate and then all of a sudden a year later something happens and then you're just caught out of the blue with that. Whereas at least now, even if we don't always have a good meeting every week, because maybe there's only a few people that hop on or whatnot, but we are there regularly enough that we're able to catch things pretty quickly and start talking about it. And we may not have all the answers, but at least we're starting to make headway to that. And then also we can bring it up then and say, hey, what are we going to do if you really need to start having this assistance, sort of thing.
Yeah. One of the things that I wanted to really just kind of point out is I was, I've been ideating on launching a podcast for a few years now. And it was really centered around this space. But I was searching for the right topic. What's the right focus? Who are the guests, right? And really what came through in lots of conversations with people who are aging themselves, people who are helping support someone else with their aging journey was a sense of community. For a lot of folks in this space, people feel very alone, right? It's not really talked about in a lot of spaces, right? Not much at work. Maybe even if they're part of a religious community, like it's not something where there's a lot of talk yet. I think that is shifting, and I hope that we can help to shift that narrative. But what I really wanted to kind of tap into was one of the things that as we're bringing in guests, my goal is to bring sandwich stories from around the world, right? That are different, that are maybe you and I have some similarities and a lot of differences, right? So that people don't feel alone, but also so they can learn tips and tricks, right? I have historically, as almost a lifetime caregiver with a mother who lives with mental illness, I have been the primary caregiver most of my life. It's only been over the last year that I started having conversations with her two other children, my two sisters on that side, about, look, this is not, I'm going to need help. And I'm not saying that we need to divide things into thirds, right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying let's look at our areas of specialty, the ways in which we approach the world, the things that maybe we enjoy doing or are easier for us, and let's start to look at how can we support each other. And it reminded me of what I'm doing with my siblings now as I'm seeing my mom, she's still quite young, but because of mental illness, it is slowing her down earlier than maybe some other folks. And so getting ahead of that, right, that proactiveness. But what I love that you talked about is part of what putting together the spreadsheet as a starting place and what you just talked about was it created a tighter bond between you and your siblings and navigating this journey with your parents. And I love how you talked about even something that people might have missed out on, that mom is struggling with lifting her arm and she's getting more tired. And then you took that as a talking point for your siblings to talk through, right? And it's such a great thing. But having in the past and myself been alone in this, I do feel very differently. And I felt very grateful for you and your siblings that you are there with each other. And I hope that our listeners, if they have people in their circles where others are willing to step in, whether it's a sibling, a friend, a cousin, an aunt, whoever it is who can help them, like don't do it alone, because this can be very challenging on your own.
So that's interesting that that's interesting bringing this up because I still don't get along with my brother.
Those are dynamics that are set in childhood, right?
Right. I don't get along with my brother. My sister is a lot older, so we're kind of like from a different generation. And so it's still, that hasn't changed. What has changed is we're just kind of there at the same time, seeing some of the same things. And so it gives us a chance to talk about it. And so I think the thing that's interesting is you don't have to solve all your problems. And when I'm thinking about when the list first got started, it was a bit awkward. I think I had to, as the project manager, experienced project manager person, take the lead
Yep.
and be like, look, let's just start making a list. So we got the spreadsheet up and we started writing down stuff like, okay, so I know it's this, this, and this as what we talked about. What else? And then everybody's chipping in stuff. So the list kind of got built fairly quickly. And anytime somebody brought something up, I'm like, well, I'll put it on the list, or we'll add it to the list, or at our meeting, bring it up and we'll add it to the list. And so you also want to review the list and be like, what are we doing now? And you only want to pick a couple things to work on. That's the other thing too. You're not working on everything at once. What you do is you say, what's the top thing we're going to work on? And so we've only had like maybe 2 or 3 or 4 items that were active at any one time. So we have to go to the list, pick the most important items in the list, and then mark those as doing, sort of thing. And in theory, if you have like 4 people, you only want 4 active things. That's if you're at work. But as a group where everybody's busy, if you have 4 people, maybe you only want 1 or 2 items that you're working on. So maybe like a 1 to 4, a 1 to 3 ratio, where you're like, we're not going to be solving every single thing, but for this week, here's the item that we notice is very important that we're going to be working on. And that's a specific thing from Scrum that you do, is you don't try to do everything at once. You pick something that, and now the positive side is that whatever you pick, it's the most important thing. And if you're always picking the one most important thing to work on next, all the stuff that isn't as important ends up filtering to the bottom of the list. And so you're always focusing on the most important thing. So to kickstart it, it required me saying, I'm going to start typing stuff down. You're going to watch me here. And if you see something that's missing, chime in and I'll add it to the list. And so probably there was a lesson that happened in the first couple of times we met for them to kind of start to see how the scheduling worked and start to follow along. Once they started to follow along, it just started shifting into, okay, I get how this game works.
Yep.
So we'll do our thing. And then the other thing too is like, if they didn't get to something in a week, the goal is not to say, hey, you didn't get to this thing. And the goal is not to say, we got to keep moving on. The goal is just say, okay, well, just a reminder, this is what we have to work on. And so we've had things that were on the list that were active, but they were active for 3, 4, or 5 weeks. And that's okay, because we're still getting together. We're still talking at the end of the day. We still know what we need to do. And then, all of a sudden it gets taken care of. And then, you can mark that off and move on to some of the next stuff. And if you have to, you can, I think I added another category, which was like, what is it, like waiting, or like, so that way we can add a few other things that we're actively doing, but not to forget that one that needs to be done. But just you kind of got to wing it a little bit just to see how you can add those things. But it's really important you don't add too many items that are active at any one time. But we had to kick off the list first by writing stuff down. And then once you start writing stuff down, people start remembering things, or throughout the next few weeks, you'll start, oh yeah, we got to do this, we got to do that. So you add it to the list, but then also show them, okay, we're going to pick this one thing that's going to be active now. This is the one thing we're going to try to get done. And sometimes it requires, like, let's say my mom had too many bank accounts and she needed to consolidate them. And so making sure maybe my sister can help her get out to all the banks she needs to get out to get them all consolidated. Who needs to be there at the right time? Sometimes that's an issue. So it was also a matter of me not being like the one with like the ruler or the whip or whatever, like saying this has to be done. But just by having a list and getting to get it regularly, and also maybe a little bit like, okay, well, we really need to get this thing done. But that's it. Like, not, a little bit of pushing, but like not really like, trying to put my foot down or anything. But I think it required a little bit of a kickoff of, let's write the list, let's meet a few times, let's see how this is working. Do we like this? And I think everybody really liked it. And that's why we kept doing it.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So what would be one thing or one recommendation that you would share with our listeners who haven't gotten started yet? Just one piece of advice about getting started.
Started with being able to help their parents
Yeah.
in conjunction with their siblings.
Yep.
Um, I think I think that would be it. Like just say, hey, let's all get together on a Zoom. If you're all remote, I actually think being remote is better.
Hmm.
You seem to be able to organize a little bit more when you can have a spreadsheet up that you can share and everybody's on video. I mean, it might be possible that if everybody lives in the same place, you might have to say, hey, we're going to go to a computer somewhere, like everybody get
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
computers out or something. I don't know. Maybe your parents don't have access to a computer. Maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay to be at home if there's a way you can get a monitor where you can set it up in the dining room,
Yep.
probably with your laptop where you can display the monitor. I think we actually did that once when we were all together. Um, but or if it's on paper, I guess it has to be on paper. But figure out a way to get everybody in the same room and just start making a list. And I think if you do that, that'll be a big step. And then if you're able to get together again and review the list, then that'll be your second step. And I think if you could get those two things happening, it'll just start to kind of fall into a cadence sort of thing. The only other thing is if the meetings people stop showing up because scheduling conflicts, just keep
Yep.
figuring out when is the right time for everybody to meet, so that way you keep it going too. But that'd probably be my objection starting.
Fantastic. So, as we're getting ready to wrap up, I would love to hear if your parents, or maybe when your parents listen to this episode, what would you want to say to them?
Just I don't know. Just I love them.
Yeah.
Hi, parents. I love you. I understand you weren't perfect. I'm a parent now, so I know I'm not perfect. And I get what the issue is with multiple siblings and all that. And yeah, I don't know. What would I say to them? I think they know I love them. I tell them I love them. We do that all pretty consistently. So um, I think the thing I would tell them is I'll see you at the next meeting
Yep.
because they know. So if they hear this now,
It's
you
a
know what I mean?
reminder.
It's a reminder. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
love
we'll all
that.
be getting together. Actually, there is one hilarious thing I just have to mention
Please.
is that because we haven't been really as official about the list lately, because we've really gotten a lot of stuff taken care of, we had talked about having you come join one of our meetings just to
Yeah.
see, and everybody's on board. I think it would be fun. But the big hesitation was, do we have to pretend like we're looking at the list again? Do we
No,
have to
no
like make
pretending.
it fun?
No
I know.
pretending.
So we were like joking around. I was like, yeah, we're gonna do like Robert's Rules of Order, and we're gonna like have formality and all of that. And we're just joking, but like, I mean, so yeah, we'll have you come out and like hang out and visit and see kind of us meeting and all that kind of stuff. But because we've kind of given up the list, I think the big worry everybody had was, gosh, are we going to have to bring the list up again and pretend like we're really organized about it now?
No, no. And for our listeners, a little bit more about background is, as shared, Biagio and I met as we were building Tumbleweed, right, which is what powers the Sandwich podcast. And one of the things that, right, the art of the ask, I said, hey, would it be okay if I join y'all sometime? And you immediately said, yes, let me connect with the family. And it really is just to learn and to see. For me, it's really a bit of, I love what you're doing. And I know a lot of people are doing something similar, maybe paper, maybe Excel, maybe they're using a tool like Tumbleweed. Like, it looks different for different folks. But it reminds me too of why I do this work. And it really is just seeing how families can come together and circle around our aging population, right? And kind of help them navigate that journey. And also too, then it makes it easier for the next generation who will be helping to support you and others, right? And so for me, it's really just a learning experience. And also I want to be there to celebrate with all of you for what you're doing.
Yeah. There's one thing that you caught my attention on, which is there, and trying to provide some encouragement and hope.
Yeah.
The thing about this list is that if everybody's keeping a list, there probably is another opportunity out there, which is it's not one person's list, but now it's a shared list.
Yes.
And so transitioning from I'm the one keeping the list to everybody else has pitched in. So like one thing you might want to do is if you have a list and you get your siblings on a Zoom call, don't show them the list right away. You know, put in a few items and say, what else are we missing?
Yep.
And let everybody else add a few things. And then slowly you can add your list in there. But it's now a new kind of list now, because it's not your list. It's your siblings and your parents' list as well as yours. And now it's a shared list, right? So
Shared
converting from the I've got a list going to we've got a list going.
Yeah, because now it's ours, right? It's not just yours.
Yeah.
It's we've got shared commitment, we've got shared insight. I feel like my voice is heard, right? I'm really worried about this with mom and dad, or whatever the situation is.
That's
and
yeah.
you get to hear what they're worried about,
Yep.
and you get to check those things off together. Hey, we checked this thing off.
Yes.
Maybe so and so had to go do it, but we checked this off together. Look, we've got a lot of work done. And you can feel that accomplishment together.
That's amazing. I can't think of a better way to wrap this session. And Biagio, thank you so much for joining us today on Sandwiched. It's been a pleasure. I've enjoyed knowing you it'll be a year this fall. My word, life sure does fly. So thank you for everything that you're doing, and thanks for joining us today. We so appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. Glad to. It's been great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Sandwiched is a Second Act Studio production with support from Tumbleweed. We couldn't do this without the support of our production team, Maddie Willis, Brennan Plank, and our interns, Eileen O'Doherty and Anthony Cano. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone. Have a great one.